G'day everybody, Wade Northhausen here for Billboard Battalion. Today we're coming to you from the Shrine of Remembrance in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. Melbourne's capital city here of Victoria, and where we're standing today on the Shrine of Remembrance, this is an incredibly important place in Australia's history, Australia's military history, and an incredibly important place in terms of remembering the enormous sacrifices that people have made here. Tyranny, dictators, people in countries who are their own citizens, the ones that want to try and take over the world, the ones have really serious bad intentions. And throughout history, we've seen many of these people have murdered millions and hundreds of millions of people, and as I said, many in their own countries. So the whole purpose of what the shrine here represents is to say we in Australia are absolutely committed to fighting wherever it is in the world to keep peace and to keep people's freedoms and keep their rights. And I think this is an incredibly important thing to keep in mind when we're talking about the events that happened here on the 22nd of September 2021. So to set the scene, as we all know, we saw on the 11th of March 2020, the World Health Organization, which is an international terrorist organisation. People think it's about your good health, but it's not. So the World Health Organization declared that there was a worldwide pandemic. And this so-called, it was a total fraud, but this so-called worldwide pandemic was called COVID-19. And that put in place a whole heap of things that happened throughout the world. But what that was a declaration of war against the people of every country in the world by a bunch of people who think they have the right to decide what happens in the world, who lives and dies, and where and when and how. So that was what occurred on the 11th of March 2020. So after that, we saw a lot of countries, by their governments, pushing them into lockdowns. They said, well, COVID-19 is this contagious disease. We have to go into lockdowns at the end of the day, they were saying that we've got to have some sort of vaccine. So Melbourne, as many people would know, became the most lockdown city in the world by far. And under the terrorist Daniel Andrews, who was making out he was the Premier, the terrorist Daniel Andrews started to impose enormous, harsh lockdowns and pressures on the people of Melbourne and, in fact, Victoria, the worst in the world by a long stretch. So that then started to push people to protest about being locked in their own houses, only allowed to leave the houses for a few minutes of a day, only allowed to go a very short distance. And this started to cause massive problems, massive harm and damage in society, which they knew was going to happen. And I put it to you that in fact is and was the purpose. That was what they were trying to achieve. So when we saw these protests start to happen, and there were protests all over the world, in fact, but here in Melbourne, we saw protesters start to be attacked for so-called breaking the rules of the Chief Health Officer, another terrorist who should be jailed for life. And then we saw the response. Daniel Andrews ordered the very, very corrupt Chief Commissioner of Police, Shane Patton, to send out the troops. The Victoria Police Force was thrown against the people of Victoria. And what we saw were some of the most horrendous and atrocious, violent physical attacks on the people of Melbourne by Victoria Police in our history. These things, that for anybody who saw the footage back then, these things were egregious, they were criminal actions, and they were in violation of every human right known to man or anything that's documented anywhere. So that happened for quite a number of days. Now, police, under the instructions of the chief terrorist, Daniel Andrews, acting on instructions from international terrorist organisations like the WHO and the World Economic Forum, and in particular the United Nations. Everybody thinks the United Nations are about peacekeeping. Well, they're absolutely not. They're actually invasion forces. So we saw Daniel Andrews order Patton to throw the forces of Victoria Police into the streets. And what we saw were attack after attack after attack. And these are people who were coming out with weapons. They were attacking unarmed protesters who simply wanted to be able to stay alive. And this is the nuts and bolts of it. This was something that was going to kill people with everything that was happening, and that's all people wanted, to be able to stay alive. So the police attacked them with everything known to man, including armoured vehicles. Now these are military armoured vehicles that they used in the attacks against the people of Melbourne. This is horrendous stuff. We've never seen this in this country before, but I'm telling you now, we're going to see it again. And this is a big part of why we're doing what we're doing here. This is the second time the Billboard Battalion has done this live from the Shrine of Remembrance in Melbourne, because we need the people of Australia and the world to work out what happened here so that we can make sure this never happens again. And if it does start to shape up, that people actually recognise what's happening. And we need to make these filthy, stinking politicians who are, basically running an agenda that is a terrorist agenda, understand that the people of Australia are not going to take this. So that's what led up to this. And on the day, the 22nd of September 2021, people were corralled and pushed by police to this area here. Now, there's a lot of people who criticised the protesters for ending up here where they were, but they were pushed and forced here, corralled here like cattle. So when the people ended up being stuck here and rounded up and caught here, we saw then the attacks begin in earnest. Now, we've seen a lot of the people who basically run the shrine, a lot of our military leaders, a lot of police leaders, political leaders, and in particular the media really go to town on the people who were here. Now, my bone of contention is that there are also many people who said this is the Shrine of Remembrance, and what we have to revisit what its purpose is. And its purpose is to highlight the sacrifice, the lives that were lost by people fighting for freedom of citizens of countries against world tyranny, against dictators, against people who would use police and military force against their citizens. That's the whole purpose of this Shrine of Remembrance right here today. So what happened here was the exact opposite. There is no greater symbol of tyranny or dictatorships or out-of-control politicians who attack their own people than to do this here at the Shrine of Remembrance, given that the whole purpose of this place is to commemorate the people who died trying to keep their citizens free. And in many cases, foreign citizens. We've been in many wars overseas. We've only really had one assault on Australia, was in World War II when the Japanese attacked Australia. So to date, we've been relatively safe. We've been relatively free. We've had the opportunity to prosper, be happy and healthy, and make good lives, give our kids a great country to live in. So what happened here on that day was police moved in with armoured vehicles, military vehicles, and armed police, and they opened fire on the unarmed, innocent citizens who were simply trying to just protest for their right to stay alive. That's what happened. Now, many of the commentators say, oh, well, the police only use rubber bullets. Oh, well, that changes everything. Only use rubber bullets. That's great. So here's the deal. Rubber bullets can be lethal. And you've got a bunch of psychos, a bunch of terrorists dressed up as police who think that they have the right to just shoot people. And I'm here to tell you now that I've seen screenshots of text messages between some of those police, and they were wanting to use live ammunition to shoot people dead on the steps of the Shrine of Remembrance here in Melbourne. So this is how serious this stuff is. And we look at what drove that. And what drove that was, in a big part, the media creating the hatred. A big part of that were the politicians creating the hatred. This was a specific strategy. The leadership of Victoria Police creating hatred and division between community members, calling people criminals, saying they're breaking the Cho directions. Well, as I said, the Cho directions were illegal, they were criminal, and they were an attack on the Australian people. And what we actually saw was the start of a war against Australia on Australian soil. The 11th of March 2020 was a declaration of war against everybody, and now we have a war situation on Australian soil. This has been launched by hostile international entities, and those entities now control our politicians. The vast majority, almost all the politicians in our country now, do not work for us. They work for, as I said, the international terrorist organisations, the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, and the World Health Organization. These are the new and improved version of the Nazis. For people who follow history, you see that the ideas that they had didn't die. They just transplanted them and gave them a face, a new paint job, and reinvented it as the World Economic Forum and the UN and the WHO. So these are some of the shocking things that have happened, and I want people to know that despite how bad the media tried to paint these people as criminals, how bad that the police on the day tried to paint them as criminals, and the government, these people are in fact victims of crimes, horrendous crimes. And in fact, the people who were here on the day were standing up for all the others who didn't turn up here. Because what we've seen since then goes to prove specifically that what I just said is correct. And I think it's very, very important for people who are the victims of these criminal offences that they are recognised. Part of what this day here is about. We see all sorts of ceremonies occur here at the Shrine of Remembrance, and I think that this needs to be recognised as a national day where Australia came under attack. This is the first time in history where anyone, any criminals, any terrorists, even though they're dressed up in cop uniforms, have opened fire on the Shrine of Remembrance with guns. Now that is literally what happened. And this is a disgraceful situation. I wanted to look at what the people who were protesting were all about. So the people who were protesting did not want to have lockdowns. They didn't want to have their lives destroyed. And as we know, that they were talking about creating some kind of a vaccine, a COVID-19 vaccine. So we need to have a look at what that's all about. We need to have a look at the science, and we need to have a look at what really happened. So when we had the COVID-19 vaccine was floated, the whole idea of it, they told us that we've got to stay locked down until we get a COVID-19 vaccine. They started talking about that we wouldn't be able to resume life if you didn't get this poison. This was not a vaccine at all. It's an absolute poison, an mRNA, completely new technology. It's a biological weapon, is exactly what it was. And to many people, it started to become clear that this was not a pandemic that just happened from nature. This was a deliberate disease that was created in the Wuhan lab in China, and was supported by a big part of that was the American Department of Defense and many of the American big pharma research operators there, and also the likes of Tony Fauci. And as we've gone through history, we've found out now that these people have been working on this for a long time. And in fact, decades ago, the Department of Defense from US, they undertook testing of COVID viruses to become a weapon, and they said that in an event there is a COVID outbreak, the go-to drug was ivermectin. Ivermectin is proven decades ago to be incredibly effective against killing COVID-19. So we have a look at the actual science, but before we do that, I want to just make some points here that I think are incredibly important. That people were correct protesting against this. They were correct that the government was going to come after them. They were correct that, as it turned out, This is a war against the people by people who want you gone. They want us gone. But, you know, in the comments that I'm making here about Victoria Police and cops from all over the world, what happened here was our police force, from the hierarchy of our police forces, allowed themselves to be overtaken and controlled by killers. That's our government. And generally speaking, our police force does a fantastic job. There are so many people owe their lives to being saved by police. You know, if people are in trouble, they call, they come. And that is how it is supposed to be. I know some fantastic people who are cops, and they've dedicated their life to keeping people safe and protecting people. However, on this occasion, we saw our police force become run by politicians for political and military purposes. So we need to, once again, push this as hard as we can, keep the public awareness there, and make people understand this can never ever happen again. And one of the things that I found out from a lot of our cops at a lot of our protests, I've spoken at a lot of the rallies and marches and so on, is that many of the cops were doing this because they wanted to keep their job. And many of them said to me, you know, we've got mortgages to pay, we've got kids to feed, etc., etc. And I totally get that. But one of the things that I regularly do is turn around to whatever police are in attendance on guard duty, whether it's at Parliament House or whatever, and say, I want you coppers to understand that in order to keep your job, the Chief Commissioner of Police, Shane Patton, forced you to take a lethal injection to keep your job. An absolute killer. This thing is a killer. So therefore, I say, Police Command have set you up to be murdered, as have our politicians. And what you're doing and what you did was you were helping the government to set up the very systems that they intend to use to kill you, your family and your kids. You need to get with the program and work out exactly what's happening and what they're doing to you. And I must say, you know, that's had a very profound effect on a lot of our coppers, because many of them have spoken to me afterwards and on the marches and so on, and are starting to understand what's going on. And many of them actually thank us, Billboard Battalion, for what we're doing, for the commentary, for the pushing that they feel they can't push, because they know we are defending their family. So I think that is quite amazing. We need to go. So I say to our cops, well done for starting to come on the side of what's right. And the other thing I wanted to say is that they began to hate Daniel Andrews because they saw many of their own families being attacked. And one big ticket item that I think was really good, we had a number of protests in Melbourne about the Kill the Bill. And I know that there was a massive, great protest occurred, and Daniel Andrews, the chief terrorist of Victoria, ordered every cop who had a heartbeat to be on the job that day against the protesters. And I can tell you now, I spoke to a lot of cops who said most of their colleagues called in sick that morning. Most of their colleagues had had a guts full of Andrews and what was happening. So they called in sick and they didn't turn up. So there was a handful of cops spread around, and I think that was a great turning point. I reckon that was one of the things where this filth bag Andrews decided he better start pulling back. But a lot of the damage was already done. So when we look at the actual idea of COVID and the vaccines, these poisons, I speak to a hell of a lot of medical experts, doctors, professors, and so on. and they have explained to me very, very clearly that the so-called COVID vaccine with the mRNA technology is not a vaccine, and it is not designed to keep you safe. The only thing that it is designed to do is cause damage and harm, to injure, maim people and then kill them. This is something that attacks your own body, and it makes your own body attack itself. It also creates artificial blockages in your arteries. It creates strokes, the heart attacks and the organ failure, and it also has a component in it called SV40, which is specifically designed to create cancer. So in one section, what it does is it destroys your immunity, your immune system, and then it creates cancer all over your body, in organs everywhere. And this now has been termed turbo cancer. And in many, many cases, our medical professionals, our doctors, because people are dropping dead all over the world from this stuff, our doctors say they are baffled. Well, they're not baffled. They're in the business of killing people. And this is one of the many things that the people of Victoria and Australia were very, very interested in fighting back against. And this is going on every day. We're seeing people across the world now dropping dead everywhere from these mRNA COVID-19 poisons. And like I say to many of our cops when we're doing these and so on, you will now know many people who have become sick, injured, and have already died from this so-called COVID-19 vaccine. Now, this is so serious, and I am very, very glad to see that we're having cops all over the world are working this out and are now standing with the people. I want to have a look at here in Australia, Daniel Andrews, the ex-Premier of Victoria, and the National Cabinet. The National Cabinet was made up out of the Prime Minister and many of the state and territory leaders, the premiers and chief ministers, who helped to orchestrate this attack on the Australian people. Make no mistake in the world, we are at war, and these people are there to wipe us out. And I get many people who say to me, why would these politicians do that way? Well, if you understand how politics works, and Billboard Battalion has been doing a fair bit of work in Parliament House, Canberra, the last few months, and if you understand how it works, these politicians are subjected in many cases to lobbyists and other people in power who come along and tap them on the shoulder and say, listen, you're resisting against certain things happening is pointless, because the corporations and the people who are doing this are going to take over our country, your country, the other countries, and they intend to wipe out the majority of people in the country. So the politicians, many of them who love the money and the power and the fame and everything else, they just go, all right, well, I'm just going to go along with that. And what that creates is this gives these international terrorist organisations like the UN, the WHO and the WEF, that gives them the legislation to actually pull off what they want. And these politicians sign your countries, our country, up to international treaties, which then give them even more power. And we've seen this happen in many, many occasions. But right now we have the most dangerous one, and that is countries signing international health regulations and the One Health policy with the WHO. Now, this quite literally gives the WHO absolute control of whatever country has signed up to it. And I'm telling you right now, this is going to get rough. We haven't seen anything yet. So what this gives them the power to do is to declare any kind of a thing they want as being a pandemic. And for those who have seen the setup of this, the climate change hoax and fraud over the last 30 odd years, one of the things that they're going to do is to say that climate change is now a pandemic, and they get to shut down everything that they claim causes climate change. Now that is your transport, your manufacturing, your ability to transport food, to grow food. It attacks our farmers. Everything they're talking about here is going to shut down your life, and I mean permanently. It gives them the capacity and the power to stop you from travelling anywhere, to lock you down in your homes permanently. Disguise of the carbon contribution to climate change. As I said, it's a fraud. Everything about that is a total fraud. But this is so dangerous because part of their strategy is to shut down your ability to get food. And we're seeing across the world, so many countries now have brought in policies that attack their farmers, attack the food production. Now this is so serious. People need to understand what this is about. And people need to understand, I'm saying this to you as a farmer, the things that are stopping us from producing food are growing. And they're all coming from government regulation. They're all coming from the World Health Organization under the disguise of trying to keep you healthy. The World Health Organization are responsible for the deaths of millions of people. Your politicians, they are murderers, they are killers, and they are working for the people who hate you. So I wanted to have a bit of a go back to Daniel Andrews for a minute. When I talk about Andrews being a terrorist, keep in mind that just recently, Andrews has been in China and he's been there with the likes of Xi Jinping, the likes of Kim Jong-un, and many of the other international dictators whose human rights abuses about killing their own people are second to none. So Andrews is an absolute terrorist, as are the people who he operates with, and the things that we have seen have been so shocking, so bad. When we'll talk a minute about the coppers in England, but I just wanted to say here that what we've seen with these attacks, we need our police to start prosecuting the politicians, the Chief Health Officer, the Prime Minister. We need to prosecute the ex-Chief Commissioner of Police, Shane Patton, because these people, they are criminals. They've committed enormous crimes against humanity. The Chief Commissioner of Police is Australia's primary cop killer. How many police now are sick or dying because they were forced to take this lethal injection? And in Queensland recently, they made a court ruling that there was no right for Queensland Police to force their officers to take this mandated lethal injection. And the same was said about the paramedics in Queensland too. So people are dying, and many of our cops and many of our military are dying because of what this filthy scumbag did. So where are our police arresting these criminals? We hear a lot of politicians talk about, oh, you know, we should have a royal commission into the COVID thing. No, we don't need a royal commission. We need our police to act. They have absolute massive evidence of the worst crimes in history that have been committed, premeditated, deliberate crimes that see people killed. Where are our coppers? This is your time. This is what you have the power to do. You have the power to take this on, and you must. This is the biggest crime against Australia. You took part in the stuff that happened originally, now you know. The evidence is crystal clear what's happened and what's been done. And once again, I would highlight the incredible hatred that was spread by our media. We cannot stress this enough. Our media should be jailed. And it's no cause for celebration to see so many of the media who call people terrorists, neo-Nazis, anti-vaxxers, dangers to the society, who now themselves, we've seen much footage now of these people dropping dead on camera, just keeling over and carking it on the spot. Exactly the same as we've seen many of our young sports people, particularly young men, the height of their fitness, and these people dropping dead all over the world. So we know what's going on, and I'd say to police forces across the globe, it is time for you to go and arrest these people and charge them criminally in court. Don't worry about royal commissions, get amongst it because the evidence is there. These people need to be chased down, hunted down and arrested. They need to stand trial in court. We want to have a look at the UK because right now we're streaming directly into the UK through Freedom Train International, and we've got direct links there going right out through the United Kingdom, going right out across the world, and we want to really make it so that people understand what's happening. In the UK, there's massive unrest going on in there, and I want people to understand this is by design. Everything that I've talked about here is by design. It is a specific strategy. And the civil unrest that we're seeing in England now and right throughout Europe is enormous. It is premeditated. It is deliberate. So I wanted to talk to, I don't know what you call them, the English coppers, the bobbies, Metropolitan Police, I don't know. Now these people, they should all be sacked immediately. They should be jailed, because what we're seeing is people who are making a comment, saying something, people who might be praying, people who might be putting up a post on Facebook or the internet or something. These people are being arrested and jailed. Can you believe this? So I would say to you right now that the English police absolutely hate the English people. They are traitors and they should be got rid of. They should be sacked, and because UK now is falling into a war zone, as is most of Europe. But I wanted to talk specifically about the United Kingdom because I know many of the farmers over there, they are losing their farms. The English government, and in fact the European Parliament, generally speaking, is bringing in policies that are attacking the English farmers. They're attacking the German farmers, the Netherlands. The Netherlands are in the business of shutting down 3,000 farms under these lies about climate change. Climate change was invented by a think tank to be used as a weapon to shut down people's lives and to shut down your economies, your food production, transport, everything under these disguises. And for people who took any notice, we were told that by the year 2000, if we didn't do something climate, or actually back in the time it was called global warming, then by the year 2000, the polar ice caps will have melted. Well, I'm here to tell you it's a pretty nippy old day here in Melbourne. There's a freezing cold wind blowing that's coming straight off the Arctic, and I'm here to tell you that the polar ice caps are still there. So they were full of crap. They lied to you. And all these so-called climate scientists who push this are barefaced liars. They are being paid enormous amounts of money. If they want their funding, they have to toe the line and they have to come up with their papers and their reports that push the lies and the fraud. Exactly the same as the medical profession who push the lies and the fraud about these vaccines, who push the lies and the fraud about the COVID thing itself. And when we saw in Australia here the bans on ivermectin. Ivermectin kills COVID. We know it does. We've seen international doctors from across the world, the ones who have actually used it, have said they've wiped out COVID-19 in a matter of days. Took people from the verge of being dead to being back up and going, very healthy, great oxygen sats, back breathing and up and pumping. So we need to understand what this is about. And we need to understand that they're going to do this again. They're constantly talking about when the next pandemic starts. We hear Mark Butler, who is the Australian Minister for Killing People, the Federal Minister of Health, here in the Australian Parliament, says the next pandemic, it's not a case of if, but just when. Klaus Schwab says the same thing. Bill Gates says the same thing. All these people are saying the same thing, and how do they know we're going to have another pandemic or another fraudulent pandemic? Because they are the ones creating them. There is nothing of this has happened by accident. We see also the United Nations talking about we're going to have poverty coming up very, very soon. We're going to have food shortages. Now, once again, the United Nations know that that's going to be the case because they are the ones who are creating the food shortages. They're the ones who are destroying the farmers. They're the ones who are destroying our agriculture, our food production. Once again, to go back to the UK, in the UK they're actually paying farmers not to grow food. Can you believe this? The United Nations is saying we're going to have food shortages. The UK government are paying the farmers not to grow food. So does that make any sense? And I must say that here in Australia, many people say, well, we've got to get the Labor Party out of power and we've got to vote in the Liberals. Okay, oh God. So you need to understand, the Liberals threw the last election. They threw it, state and federally. And I get reports from England to say that they believe that the same thing happened over there. To get this terrorist Starmer into power, they had to throw it. And they are not interested in winning power because that's their instructions. That is their orders from the international terrorist organisations. So therefore, these things are very, very clear indications of what is happening. And I feel very, very sorry, and we're here once again at the Shrine of Remembrance. I feel very sorry for all the people throughout the world who took part in military to fight for their countries, to fight for the freedom of their people, to see their legacy being thrown down the toilet. We see these politicians who turn up on the like and they lay the wreaths, or Remembrance Day. They lay wreaths at all the cenotaphs and even here. And they tell everybody how much we owe the servicemen and women in the past who fought for our freedoms and what an amazing job they did, and we must keep their legacy alive and we must remember them, etc, etc, etc. Well, these scumbag filth are the ones who are destroying their legacy. Here in Australia and New Zealand, we have what we call our Anzacs. And our Anzacs are the first coming together of Australia and New Zealand military forces in World War I that basically, they'd say, gave birth to our nations. Because Australian Anzacs, New Zealand Anzacs were amongst some of the ferocious and feared soldiers in the world. and we lay enormous claim to them. We constantly have Anzac Day here. We constantly say, well, we want to honour our Anzacs and remember their sacrifice. At the very same time that everything they sacrificed themselves for is being undermined and destroyed. And that's one of the reasons I'm very, very narky about some of the people here from the Shrine of Remembrance in Melbourne, and some of our military leaders in Australia, our people who have fought overseas, who say, oh, you know, the people who went to the Shrine of Remembrance, they desecrated sacred ground, etc., etc., etc. Well, actually, they were the ones who are defending the place. And I'd say to all our military or people who criticised those people on that day, and a lot of these filth bags in the media, maybe you should actually appreciate them, because everything that you've fought and died for, your mates have fought and died for, you're standing by and watching it be garroted. It is being disemboweled. So therefore, feel free to speak up and defend what your mates died for, because everything they fought for is being wiped out. And next year, we're going to approach the Shrine of Remembrance here to have an official ceremony. This is the reason why at the minute we're just doing, this is our second live commemorating this date. This is the reason why, you know, we're not holding some sort of a commemorative presentation here, an actual event, because we want the people who run the shrine to recognise that everything that they represent inside the shrine here, all the battles and all the wars, excuse me, where we've got a new war on our hands right here, right now, on Australian soil. This is happening, and this is a war, and this is the reason why we are here today, remembering what happened on the 22nd of September 2021, because we have an ongoing war. It is happening in Australia, on Australian soil, as we speak. We have just Mark Butler, the scumbag health minister, did not pull out of the World Health Organization, international health regulations. So therefore, he has now condemned Australia to losing sovereignty to the WHO terrorists. And they intend to do some shocking, terrible things. And I can tell you right now, just in the farming side of it, we've seen big changes to our so-called biosecurity laws, legislation, and what we're seeing here is the government is setting up to get rid of people off their farms, to take farmland off them, to take houses and property off people. This is what the legislation is set up to do. The WHO has now assumed full sovereignty control over Australia and any other country that's signed up to it. So these are just some of the things that we really need to highlight. And I must say, on this live, we're very grateful to our friends over in the UK there, Freedom Train International, Jim Ferguson and Lee's doing an amazing job, producer across there. It's between 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning or something like that over in the United Kingdom right now. And these people are up and they're doing this. So this is a massive effort, and I want people to look at this live and share this everywhere you possibly can. Feel free to get onto Billboard Battalion and follow us. Get onto Billboard Battalion and see what we're doing. Have a look at the lives that we're doing. Have a look at the actions that we're taking. And in particular, keep an eye on what we're doing in Parliament House, Canberra, in Australia right now, because that is our capital city. And, you know, we've seen many protests over the last few years, some massive protests at Parliament House in Canberra, which are all important. But we also need to do that in conjunction with strategies. These strategies need at the actual politicians. There's many people who say a lot about the politicians, about their legality, about whether they're actually a legal entity. But right at the minute, they are the ones who are signing us up to international suicide pacts, which is what it is. They're giving the international terrorists the right to take us down, to destroy us. We're going to see a lot more in the way of these bogus pandemics, where they have now given themselves the power to attack people, to drag people out of their homes, jail them, forcibly inject them. We've just seen in Melbourne the completion of a new mRNA biological weapons factory. And this stuff is going to be everywhere. This mRNA factory in Melbourne has the capacity to produce millions and millions of doses of this biological weapon, this poison. Now, they're going to call it some kind of vaccine for this, for that, something else. But this is an attack on you, it's an attack on us, and this is growing worldwide. I think a safe rule of thumb, if anything that government tells you is good for you, well, it's not. The exact opposite is in fact the truth. I think when we see people like a chief medical officer or a chief health officer speak, they're lying. They should be in jail. I would not, for my opinion, I would not take any notice. I would not heed what they say. If they say they're trying to keep you safe, they're actually trying to kill you. And there's a lot of people who 4 years ago thought that that was madness. They thought people are cracked in the head for saying this. Well, I can tell you right now, there are millions and millions of people around the world who have switched on. The penny has dropped. The light bulb has come on. So we must start to get enormous pressure on these politicians. We're seeing across the world massive protests now. They must escalate in numbers. I'm not talking about violence. I'm talking about escalate in numbers. We need the powers that be to get the message that the filthy peasants are at the door with the pitchforks. Now, I don't mean pitchforks literally, that's a saying. But that's what needs to happen, because I'm here to tell you, your families are at incredible risk. And these attacks, these killings, have been being set up now for generations by the so-called elites. These are the people who call themselves elites. And I want you to know that some of the highest elites consider that there is absolutely no such thing as human rights. You have no right to anything. If you look at Yuval Harari, who is one of the chief scumbags with the World Economic Forum, his videos before, he has said about the subject of human rights. If you take a human and you cut him open, all that's inside, you will find blood, you will find organs, intestines, whatever, but nowhere inside a human being do you find human rights. There's nothing. There is no such thing. He, in fact, now talks about people being the useless class. They talk about AI taking over jobs from farmers, truck drivers, doctors, etc. So therefore they're saying that you have a class of people that are no longer required. They are superfluous to requirements. These are the sociopathic sicko whack jobs who are running the world. They're the ones who now control your politicians. We hear the likes of the WEF talk about water, the right to water. And they openly say that there is no such thing as a human being's right to have water. Now, if you don't think that's concerning, there's something very, very wrong with you. And I've seen footage now of some of the African countries where they have machines there and people have to put in an identification system just to get a drink of water. This stuff is very real and it's very, very dangerous. Here in Australia just recently, our filthy scumbag government got over the line legislation about under 16-year-olds have to prove, or they're not allowed on the internet on some certain platforms. So now what that's done is that's going to make it so that everybody who goes on the internet is going to have to prove whether or not they're 16 years of age or over. So that brings in your digital identification system. There is their right to start shutting down your rights. You're going to have to identify yourself just to get on the internet. That will expand, and they will use what they call the social credit system, the ESG. And the ESG is a set of numbers that they will attribute to someone to say, well, you have an ESG score of X, and that allows you to buy a little bit of food, or that stops you from getting food, or that stops you from being allowed to get on the internet. So many of these things that people have said, and we've been called conspiracy theorists and nutters, these things are happening now. The legislation's being put in place, and our politicians are the ones who are enabling these international terrorist groups to take down you and your family. And now we're seeing many, many more people who are switching onto this. And part of their scam is to have zones where people are going to be corralled into, but they won't be able to leave. There's some people think this is rubbish, but I would suggest you have a look at a lot of the things that are happening now. Managed retreats, 15-minute cities, exclusion zones for people. We're seeing our farmers in many cases now being made unviable. They're putting in places rules and regulations under climate change modelling that forces farmers off the land, where they have what they call human-free zones. This is the 30 by 30 plan. And then they're talking about the 50 by 50 plan. People have the right to look this stuff up, and I suggest you do, because this is going to affect everything that you do. And finally, I'd want to talk about the language that people use. You know, I'm not talking about getting on the internet and swearing your guts out and acting like a clown. I'm talking about we need to start using language that correctly reflects what's happening. We need to get people who are not too frightened to say, well, they are coming after us. This is a war. The climate change is a fraud, which it is. The whole COVID thing was a fraud. These mRNA killers, they are deadly. And your politicians are deliberately in the business of shutting down your life, your country, your kids' lives and your grandkids. You're not going to have kids' lives and grandkids. We need people to be have the guts to say this. And if people do say that, we need to support them. If they're bringing to the public that is rational and sensible, in a way that is just honest. We need to look at a lot of the crap they talk about with regard to speech. Hate speech laws have only one purpose. That's to shut down one side of an argument. Because we see the other side say as much hateful stuff as they want. Call for people to be killed, to people to be dead. We heard about all the COVID stuff. All the commentators, many of the commentators in the media said, oh, you know, these people who won't take the vaccine, they should die. Well, that's hate speech. When we see one side of a thing shut down and another side of a thing allowed to go for it, particularly the woke lefty stuff. you know that's hate speech. But we shouldn't have a thing called hate speech. We should have a thing called open, free speech, where people's ideas can be challenged in the public arena. If you say something that's hateful to somebody, and this is what what's happening in England, we're seeing these half-witted, demented, low-life scum so-called police in England who are going around saying to people, oh, we got a report that you said something that's upset someone. And these England-hating cops are attacking their own people. What the hell is wrong with you half-demented morons? Understand what you're a part of. Don't do it. Tell your bosses, tell your government, we're not doing this. We are not going to attack England, because that is literally what you're doing. You're either fighting for England or you're fighting against it. If you uphold these laws, anything to do with anybody who's associated with the World Economic Forum or the UN or the WHO, you are protecting terrorists and you're attacking your own country. And just understand that the things, as I said here before, the things that you're protecting and you're helping the government to bring in, they're going to use it against you, you stupid fool. So I would suggest to all English police and any police in any country, if your government tells you to do something that you know is wrong, say no. Tell them that you're not going to do that. You're going to stand with the people. Because as far as I understand, most of the coppers I know are there because they care about the safety of their community. They're there to try and keep people safe. But their government throws them under the bus. Well, they have to say no. The great work that our cops do in trying to by the judges and the courts. They are let down by the politicians who control the judges and the courts. And for people who think that the courts operate separate to the government, you're on drugs. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, and the evidence now proves that. So we need to, in those things, we need to back our coppers, because we see here in Australia attacks happening all the time now. And these are multiple offenders. And many of the cases, this happens when they're out on bail and they just do it again. And our coppers go and round them up. They take them to court and the judges let them out again. Like, what the hell is going on? Well, I'll tell you what's going on. This is a deliberate attack on our country. They are deliberately causing our social and our economic disruption and distraction. And I don't want to hear people say anymore, don't these politicians understand how much damage they're doing? I've got no idea why they're doing this. Why would they doing this? Why don't they stop it? Why don't they fix this? Oh, I can't imagine why they'd be doing this. Well, I'm telling you, point blank, why they're doing this. Because they are wiping out your country to be taken over by the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. Now, I'll just close by saying here at the Shrine of Remembrance, we've got a lot happening in our country with regard to flags. There's two Australian flags that different people like and want. One's a blue Australian flag, one's a red one. But I will say to everybody, the Shrine of Remembrance here, as I understand, about 4 times a year, has some kind of ceremony where they fly the United Nations flag. It's a pale blue, horrid-looking thing with a white outline of the globe on it. Now, this is the flag of the international terrorists. These are the people who are waging war against you, your family, and your country. Now, this flag should be never flown in a free country, ever. It is, as I said, a flag of the terrorists, and we must never ever have that here. So I'll just, on that line there, I think I'll close. I think we've just about done roughly an hour, so I'm pretty happy with that. So once again in a pretty freezing cold day here in Melbourne. We're here at the Shrine of Remembrance to remember the attacks that were launched by Daniel Andrews and his terrorist crew against the good people of Melbourne. Those people who protested are heroes. They were so far ahead of their time, and I think that we can fairly say that the state of Victoria owes a big debt of gratitude to those brave, heroic people who took on forces armed, basically the military, and they had nothing more than the goodness in their heart and the knowledge of truth and the knowledge of what was being done to them. And they stood up. So I acknowledge those people, their courage and their bravery, and I demand that the rest of the country follow suit. We must fight back. We're seeing massive protests now happening all over Australia, all over the world. We need to increase that. This is the fight for your life. There is no more next time. This is here and now. It's do or die right now. And if we fail to respond and we fail to win, that is the end of everything that you are, that you ever have been, that you would like to have into the future. Your legacy, everything you have, you've ever worked for, your family is over and gone. It's here and now. Take part in this battle. Take part in this war. Fight on the side of what is righteous. Fight on the side of what is correct. Fight on the side of democracy, safety and freedom. Wade Northhausen here, Shrine of Remembrance, Monday, September the 22nd, 2025. Billboard Battalion, fighting for your freedoms, for our kids' futures. Thanks very much.